The way out of this is hyperinflation or defaulting to the Fed. Alright, there's no or. It's just hyperinflation. Alright, Crypto 101 here, and this time I have a lot to show you. So checking out this chart, we do have an entire S&P 500 dating back all the way since 1872, showing you the entire effect of inflation over a long period of time is always up and to the right. As you can see, starting up, we have 1907. This is when they had a bank panic, and they had JP Morgan and John D. Rockefeller bail out the United States government because of this widespread bank run that happened during this time. At this point, these banks required to hold 5% cash reserve versus now where we have fractional reserve of 10% cash being stored at each bank. So you can see how this can easily cause a problem overnight if they're only required to hold 5% cash reserve, and you have all these people panicking at the same time trying to get their money out during this crisis. So the government, they needed a bailout during this period, and who came to help? It was JP Morgan and John D. Rockefeller. So you heard over these years conspiracies of Rockefeller family controlling the government. This is it. This is why the banks do own the government, because JP Morgan on multiple occasions bailed out the government. Also, there was another time, 1895, he bailed the United States government from these financial crises. So this is very similar to what's happening right now in a smaller form with cryptocurrency and FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried, they're bailing out all these exchanges at the same time. So what happens? Sam Bankman-Fried is taking over all these exchanges that are illiquid, that actually are imploding, that need help. They're willing to sacrifice to get out of the situation that they're in. So JP Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, they control the banks. All right, it's not a conspiracy. You can see what happened here. Next thing that comes up, they start in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act. And this was signed into law by Woodrow Wilson, and it gave Federal Reserve banks the ability to print as much money as they need for economic stability. So this is 1913. This is where everything started. That's when the Fed got incorporated as an entity to centralize banking. Before it was decentralized, before they had many banks all over the United States, and they felt that in this kind of way, there's not enough control. They figured after 1907, because of all the instability with all these decentralized banks, they formed the central bank and the Federal Reserve in 1913. And guess who was actually one of the advisors? Surprise, it was JP Morgan Jr. So you can see how these banks do own the Feds, and they control what the governments do in society today. All right, they're the ones pulling all the strings. So this is not a conspiracy anymore. You can actually see what's going on here if you look back in time, 100+ years. This is when they started printing money. Previously, the banks were also issuing notes, IOUs, and they only had to keep 5% reserves in their banks at that time. It happened, and that's why you can see inflation starting already. But this is when it went out of control, is once you give someone power like this, like the Fed, then the amount of money that they can print out recklessly to save the entire economy is unstoppable. It's dangerous. It's something they should never have had the power to do, because we are in a bind right now, and if you can see inflation, this is the trajectory. This is which way it's going, and it's not going to stop. So now we have the 29 Great Depression. This happened right after. You can see once you start printing money, it's going to go wild. So you have the roaring 20s over here. Everyone's making a lot of money. Everyone's throwing money into stock markets. Everyone's leveraging money to buy stocks with money they don't have. They're doing 2x leverages, somewhere around there. Is not as bad as now. When that happens and the price drop, they're going to get margin called, and a domino effect happens. So that ignited the Great Depressions, dropping about 82%, where people were actually wearing paper shoes to survive, you know, just to get by. It was a different time. I don't think we're going to get to that kind of point, because our economy is booming and busting with all this technological advancement. We are not going back into the Great Depression in that kind of form, where everyone doesn't have a job, everyone's waiting in line for food. Can't imagine that. I can only imagine in our time, if it does happen, it's going to be the people that are getting close to borderline homeless, and we're going to have more homeless people out on the streets, and that's very unfortunate. But there is going to be more people in that situation, as things are already priced out for them. We are not going back to that era, and I'll explain more shortly. That was an 82% drop, and I also drew out an 82% drop in our current times, right? So this is actually not going to happen, in my personal belief, that we're going to go back to the 08 crisis in that kind of level. No, I don't think we're going to get there. So I'm going to take this back 50%, okay? So let's say about 40%. All right, let's take it to worst case scenario, 200 moving average on the monthly basis. Okay, so worst case bearish scenario, that will be the worst case. All right, so that's that. I think that's pretty fair. Anything below that, it's just like the apocalypse. Okay, it's gonna look like in 1929 depression era, where everyone is actually starving and not being able to eat or work. Okay, we're not going to get to that kind of point. Things are going to get bad, but I'm going to explain to you later, so stick around. I'm going to explain to you what is most likely going to happen in our era. So after the Great Depression, even though it lasted about 20 plus years, we always recovered due to all the Fed printing, right? Everything will come back and up to the right because the cost of everything in USD value will be devalued and will become higher. Everything will become more expensive. So this is a massive shift in the S&P 500. There's more money flowing than ever, more businesses growing during this era, and now we have the 1970 Nixon shock effect. So this is when they took us off the gold standard. All right, they ended the Bretton Woods agreement where convertibility of US dollars into gold was removed, okay, because all the countries were requesting to convert their US dollars into gold. Nixon just said, hey, we have to end this deal and we can't continue on converting your dollars to gold.
To suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Probably don't even have the reserves for it. That's the reason why they did that. And that further devalued the US dollar. And you can see from here on, this is where we're at. So in 1973, there's OPEC oil embargo against the US. So they were banned from the oil supply by OPEC for assisting Israel, I believe. Okay, so now we have a 49% drop. All right, next thing, dot-com bubble, 2000, right? So that dropped 49%. So now you can see anywhere from 33%, 49%, and right here, next one is 57%, and this was bad. This is 2008 housing market crisis. So that type of crash is probably, in my best guess, the scenario that might continue on from here on. If we do get that type of recession, 58% correction is probably more likely, not the 82% depression era where we get stuck in a lag for about 20 plus years. The chance for that is probably less likely based on our technology advancement, how much production we have in terms of our entire economy, the growth that we always consistently have every year. I do not think that we will be back in that position where everyone is scrounging for food, wearing paper for shoes. We are not going back to that level. Right, so ever since the Fed started printing money, I want to show you exactly what it looks like in terms of percent change. So you can see that this is a 56,000% increase in the S&P 500. So why would you want to go against that? Worrying about all these daily price swing, right? So only chart I look at is mainly the weekly. All right, if you're looking at macro, you want to just look at the weekly. You can actually see more consistently of what happens, right? If you want to go down to the daily, it gets more volatile. You want to get down to 1 hour, you're screwed. You're pretty much screwed. If you're looking at hour by hour and you're trying to make trades like that, you're going to lose money with all the volatility. Further you go down, the 15 minute, 30 minute, you're even worse off, okay? Because the swings on those is going to cause you to be more emotional, whereas right now, all we see is just a long line up over decades. So that's how you got to play, you know? The real money is made over 5 to 10 year spans, not the 1 to 6 months time frame, okay? Those are too volatile because during these few years, those drops are pretty severe. It's pretty bad, you know, if you look close enough, especially even worse during the Great Depression. We're not going to get there. I don't believe we're going to have a Great Depression like that. And I'm going to explain more to you why. Is because this question here, which is very important. So the way out of this is hyperinflation or defaulting to the Fed, all right? There's no or. It's just hyperinflation, okay? So we see a national debt. We've seen what the Fed can do. They have a printer.
Money printer go boom.
They could print their way out of anything, but the side effect is hyperinflation, right? They're not going to default on bonds, telling everyone, hey, sorry, we can't pay for whatever we owe you. There's no credibility for US, right? So their only solution is to print their way out of it. And at $30 trillion, you can only imagine what the interest rate is. Who should be able to print money like this? Every single government in the world is doing the same thing. They're all printing money. But for now, the answer is hyperinflation. That's the direction we're going. And you can already see why. So do you think this line will end? So do you think that we're actually going to have a drop? No, this is what happened when you increase the circulation of money into the economy, when you just print money. So this is 2.27 currency in circulation, 2.27 trillion. What happened to the rest of the money that you saw here, the 30 trillion in debt? It's all digitally printed. It's all leverage. It's all bonds, banknotes saying I owe you, right? It's all on the ledger that they have. And this is the result. Hard asset. So my question to you is, do you really believe that we're somehow just going to break through a depression era, drop further down, we're going to change the course of this trend line here of this inflation? No, this thing continues on, right? So you can see how inflation with currency circulation is growing so fast at a rate where it's actually about to go parabolic. It's already trending that way, and the next step is hyperinflation, okay? But at the same time, there's going to be a recession. So what does that mean? That is called stagflation. All right, so when you have a drop in GDP, increase in unemployment, decrease in demand, that's a recession during this period. At the same time, when people are making less money, when there's less work out and there's less production, and at the same time inflation increases, this is going to cause even a greater problem when people already having difficult time with their finances are unable to afford just the regular things like steak, like a car, and you can see the car market is expensive too. So some people don't have a few thousand saved up, they can't even buy a car. It's going to be tough, but for now, we're still hanging in there. We have good employment rate. Our GDP is actually dropping slowly, but we're still okay. Also, demand for business is still there, but it's slowing down. So we are heading towards a recession, okay? Technically, we're already in recession. EU, they're already in recession. They're not admitting it. It's already bad over there, okay? Even worse than us, when inflation rate's even higher. When you have a period of less money on hand and everything's more expensive, that causes big problems, okay? But it's not like it never happened before, right? Because after 1970, the Nixon shock, taking the US dollar off of the gold standard, and we had a stagflation during that period where prices continuously went up and people were making less money during that period, okay? So we recovered. It's not something new. So the next thing for us, if we see maybe closer to that 50%, it could happen. But if you zoom out and you see over time what's going to happen, you gotta make sure you accumulate during these prices. If it does happen, it'll be the greatest opportunity of our lifetime to have cash on the side to be able to load up during this time. Inflation over time, we are going to continue to rise at a faster rate. So it's going to be some rocky volatility for now, but we've been through this. Stagflation happens for a few years, could be 3-4 years before we recover to a new all-time high, but no one knows exactly what's going to happen here. But we just printed somewhere close to 20 to 50% of the entire national debt within the past years, 2 to 3 years. So right over here, it was 20 trillion when I first reported sometime around 2018. We're at 30 now. That's a 50% increase within the past 4 years, ever since I reported it, right? So where does that come from? It's all from that COVID stimulus plan, right? So this problem was caused directly by the Fed, which the government gave the entire power to ever since 1913, 100 plus years ago, right? They're allowed to print as much money as they want to fix whatever financial problems we have in the economy, to bail out the banks like they did in mortgage crisis of 2008. And guess what happened in 2008? I remember Washington Mutual was around. I used to bank with Washington Mutual. Chase took over Washington Mutual after that bailout. Can you believe that? So it's another big bank that has ties with the US government that ate up a smaller bank. You can see over time, anytime that we have leveraging of stocks, leveraging of money, borrowing money, it causes large volatility swing. All right, this is normal. This happens over and over ever since the Great Depression, after the Roaring 20s, when everyone's speculating on stock market, leveraging money and margin trading. It led to the worst crash ever in history. And right now we have all the other tools to do that too. We have futures, options. We have so many ways of leveraging money that we don't have, and to place bets on the market. And you can see that this entire crypto exchange crashing with Celsius, with Voyager, with Luna, it's the same thing. It's always comes down to borrowing money and playing with money you don't have, right? There's going to be negative consequences when the price drops. There's going to be margin calls. There's going to be liquidations, and it cascades from there on. And why should these banks have a 10% fractional reserve holding? They should be holding 100% of our money in there when we want to take it out. If you try to get your money a full $100,000 out, you have to give them a call ahead of time. I mean, I tried to pull out 20,000 and they looked at me crazy at the bank and say, you have to call in. Like, that's my money that I put in. You should be able to get it out with no problems, right? But it doesn't work that way, right? So they only have 10% fractional reserve for banks. They actually need more. They need way more. They need 15 to 20% if they want to avoid a bank run. So we all live in a debt cycle. Every bank, every personal users with the credit cards, every exchange, everyone is using debt, and this whole thing, it does bubble up, it gets frothy, and it does correct. Okay, so these things, it doesn't seem like anyone's going to put a stop to it. It's going to continue to happen. As you can see, over 100 plus years, it's only gone worse. So that causes all these short-term volatility swings, boom and bust cycles that happens over time and time again. But we continue to do it, and inflation will continue to rise. As you can see, it's very clear. It's not going to change trajectory. It's not going to double top and bottom out like that. It's just going to go over time higher up and to the right, but this time it's going to be accelerated. We printed too much money over the past of 2 or 3 years after pandemic, and this time they overdid it. And there's a reason being though. That's going to be set up for another video at another time. There's a reason being for them to self-destruct. Okay, so I can explain that to you next time, but this is it for this video. And if you like this type of content, make sure you guys like the video so I know you guys want this type of content, and I'll make sure to bring you guys more with more information. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification too after you subscribe. You guys will get this content early and you guys will stay more prepared for the market. Make sure to follow, and I'll see you guys on the next one.